Welcome back to the Ultimate Mixdown. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can take what you created in Easy Drummer and output each of those drums to their own individual tracks in your DAW. Now, Easy Drummer sounds great out of the box, but this is extremely useful if you want to have a little bit more flexibility when it comes time to mix your song as a whole. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. So here we have a clean slate. I'm going to create a new track with Easy Drummer on it. So I'll double click here, give it a name. Click on Insert, search for my plugin, select Easy Drummer and click Add. Now this loads Easy Drummer, and the first thing you want to do is select the drum kit you want to work with. So I'll do Metal Machine Original Mix. Now if you're interested in creating drum tracks with Easy Drummer and working with MIDI, check out my video clicking the link above. But once we have our drum kit selected, we can go to search and we can work with some grooves. So let's just audition this one. All right, and pull that in. And then let's just pull one other groove in. All right, and this is going to allow us to hear the drums and see the drums output on their own separate tracks. So before we touch anything in our DAW, we want to go to the mixer. So one thing I want to point out is you have a little extra flexibility when you select the original mix for the drum kit you're working with. You can adjust the snare bleed and dial that back if you want. And in addition to that, it'll pull both kick mics onto their own separate tracks, and it'll pull each tom onto its own separate track as well. So here we have everything set to output 1. So output 1 is going to channel 1, 2, so your left-right stereo channel. But what we want to do is set each drum and the effects at the end onto their own separate tracks. So what we would do here is we would have kick 1 on output 1, kick 2 on output 2, but you can right click on the number and select multi-channel, and Easy Drummer will do most of this for you. So the 2 kicks are going on to the same output. I'm okay with that. Snare top and bottom on separate outputs, so that works for me. But when you look at the rack toms and the floor toms, they're all going to one output. So I'm going to change these up so that they're each on their own individual outputs. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm not using the one shot or the percussion at the end, so I'm just going to pull these sliders all the way down to turn them off. And another thing I like to do is I want as much flexibility as possible mixing this in my DAW, so I'll bring all of these to 0. Just click on each one and enter 0. Okay, and once everything's at 0, we're good with Easy Drummer for now, and then let's go over to our track control panel. So what we want to do here is create a new track for each individual track that we're trying to output into our DAW. So because both of these are going to out 1 and 2, and again, I'm okay with the blend of the 2 going to their own track, we'll create one kick track, but everything else is going to have its own track. We have kick, snare top, snare bottom, hi-hats, toms, and so forth. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, and once all your tracks have names, now we can work with the routing. So in any DAW, you can route from the Easy Drummer track to their own separate tracks. Routing might work a little differently in different DAWs, so if you're not using Reaper, check out how routing works in your DAW. In Reaper, you can click the routing for the Easy Drummer track, click Add New Send, and then because we're going to send all of the outputs to individual tracks, we're going to do Add Sends to All Tracks. Now what this does is it creates a send from the Easy Drummer track to each of the individual drum tracks, but right now what's happening is the entire kit being played from Easy Drummer is being sent to each of these individual tracks. So essentially we just have an amplified 15 tracks playing the same thing that the Easy Drummer track is playing. What we need to look at is here where the sends, so what's coming from Easy Drummer being sent to the individual track, and we want to select the correct channels from Easy Drummer going into that track. What I want to point out is each of these numbers, each of these outputs are stereo outputs. So what that means is output 1 is a stereo output for channels 1 and 2. That's your left and right channel. So then this output 2 is going to be 3 and 4. And one way I like to think of it is you look at the output number and you double it, and that's the higher number of the 2 stereo channels that this is being output to. So we have 3 here, you double that for 6, and that means that this is being output to stereo channels 5 and 6. So let's go up here, we have 6, so you double it, so that's going to be 12, and then that gives you 11 and 12 as your stereo channels. Now there's ways to work with just mono, and I'm going to show you that later in the video, but for now, we're going to set our channels appropriately for what we see here in Easy Drummer. Again, let's pull up our routing. And because the kick is on output 1 and 2, we're going to leave it as is, right? So for our kick track, We'll keep this audio 1, 2. Our snare top track, this is output 2, so this is going to be channels 3 and 4. So change this here on snare top to 3, 4. Okay, and then snare bottom is going to be on channels 5 and 6. So for our snare bottom, we're going to select 5 and 6 here. Again, we're going to look at our output number, and knowing that these are stereo channels, this is going to be 7 and 8. This is going to be 9 and 10. It's going to be 11 and 12, 13, 14, and so on. Let's go ahead and adjust all of these tracks right down the line so that we match to the outputs here in EZDrummer. Okay, so we have our routing all set up. I'm just going to take everything off record enable. Once I press play, you should be able to see the individual outputs from EZDrummer playing on each of these tracks. Now doing it this way is fine, but what happens here is that you have stereo tracks. Even it's going to sound like it's in mono because it's pan center. So things like the kick, the snare, and so forth. And what I like to do is print them to audio using mono channels. So I like to minimize the amount of channels I'm using, because right now when we use stereo channels for each of these mono sounds, this got us all the way up to 28 channels. Whereas if we put snare top on one channel and snare bottom on one channel, then we're only using one mono channel. So let me show you how that works. So let's delete all of these tracks. Okay, and then in my mixer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on left and right channels. So they're going to come out of EZDrummer in either the left side or the right side, but they're going to go into your track as a mono track, and you'll hear it down the center the way that we set this up. So if you actually want to blend the two different kick mics, that's fine. Otherwise, you can keep it to one channel, but let's go ahead. So both of these are set to output 1. Again, that's channels 1 and 2. So going to the left is going to be channel 1, and going to the right is going to be channel 2. We'll do the same for the snare top and the snare bottom. So we'll set them both to the same output. So output 2, again, is channels 3 and 4. So we'll move the snare top to the left, that's channel 3, and snare bottom to the right, and that's channel 4. So we can continue the process all the way down, but let's just work with these 4 for now. So I'm going to create my kick 1, my kick 2, snare top, and snare bottom. And then again, we'll go to routing on EZDrummer, and we'll click add new send, and then add sends to all tracks. Okay, so this is the preliminary setup. And again, we want to adjust what's here under audio for EZDrummer going into those individual tracks. Now that we're working with mono, we're going to select a mono channel instead of a stereo channel. So for the first one, we have our kick 1 on the left channel of output 1. So that's going to be channel 1. So click here, go to mono source, channel 1. And kick 2 is on output 1 as well, but it's to the right. So that's channel 2. So we'll click here and we'll do mono source 2. So snare top and snare bottom are on output 2. So this is channels 3 and 4. Snare top is on the left. So that's channel 3. And snare bottom is on the right. So that's channel 4. All right, we'll close this out. Now when we play this back, it's going to sound like there's a kick pan left, a kick pan right, a snare pan left, and a snare pan right, but still bear with me. I'll play it as it is. Okay, and that's not ideal. But again, our goal is to print this to audio as mono audio tracks, and then we can do all of our mixing from there. And another benefit of doing that is that you don't have EZDrummer taking up any processing power while you're trying to mix your session. The last thing that we want to do on all of these tracks, except the EZDrummer track, is select the record. So we're going to do record output, and then we're going to do record output mono. Now it's highly important that you select record output mono because we want to just get the mono source coming in. So we'll do the same thing here, record output mono. And then for the other two tracks as well. Okay, so what's happening here is this kick is going to channel 1. And then this is going to capture the mono sound coming in from channel 1. And once we select our outputs, let's press play again just to make sure that we can hear our sounds on the individual tracks. Okay, that's good. Now we'll record arm these tracks. And then we'll press Command R on a Mac or Control R on a PC to record. And what this is going to do is it's going to record the MIDI that we have here, output it to the separate channels on the separate outputs. That'll come into the tracks as individual mono inputs, and then it'll record it as audio. Let's go ahead and do that. And if you see this message, it's just a warning telling you that you're about to record on multiple tracks. That's perfectly fine in this instance, so go ahead and click record. So as you can see, instead of having stereo tracks for each of these drums, we've recorded to mono. Again, with your overheads and your effects, you're going to want to keep those as stereo, but for the individual drums themselves, if you're going to print this down to audio, they should always be coming in as a mono source. Now we can mute Easy Drummer, and then we'll disable the record arm, and then you'll hear each of these drum sounds right down the center of the channel, unless you adjust any of the panning in your DAW. Okay, so you saw 2 ways where you can output your Easy Drummer MIDI into your DAW on individual tracks. One way where it allows you the flexibility of adjusting the MIDI output any way you wish, and another way where you can print to audio and make sure that that audio is printed mono for all of your drums. Again, keeping your effects and your overheads as stereo. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If this video helped you, hit the like button. If you want to see more videos like this and more videos about songwriting, production, mixing, anything music, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell. I hope to see you in the next video.